pot distilled, finished in port wine casks. Tonight, it's Woodinville. It's a beautiful night for bourbon. Yes, it is, folks. It's another beautiful night for drinking bourbon. And tonight, as promised in my video last week when I talked about the 5 bourbons you need for 2021, according to Matt at ADHD Whiskey, I mentioned the Woodinville Port Cask finished bourbon. It is 90 proof, which is 45% ABV, and it is a bourbon made in the state of Washington, and it is finished in port casks. Now, on the back of the bottle, they give a whole nice little story about it, how it's distilled in pot stills and finished in port casks. It's stored in barrels that have been weathered for 18 months and then charred. It does not include an age statement, so we don't know exactly how long it's been aged in those barrels or how long it was in the barrels in which it was finished, but it is handmade in Washington. What I do know is that a lot of people have tried their other bourbons and have given them great reviews. They've won some awards, and so I'm going to review this one, which is, of course, the port cask finished bourbon. Now, I put this as one of the 5 bourbons for 2021 on my list, partly because it was already on my bar and I'd already had it, but because I haven't seen a whole lot of reviews on it. Only 1 or 2, so nobody really seems to be talking about this bourbon. Nobody really seems to know much about this bourbon. It doesn't seem that anybody's really tried the bourbon. I used to see it on the shelves quite a bit, but it's disappeared. I haven't seen it on the shelf. I've seen Woodinville's other bourbons on the shelf, but I have not seen this one for quite some time, so maybe it was a limited edition. In fact, it says special limited release right on the bottle. I put this in the category of that bourbon that nobody knows about, that is hard to find, and perhaps underrated and unknown. At the time I did that, I had not yet opened the bottle. So I had no idea whether it was going to be any good or not, but now that I have mentioned it, I decided I really did have to open the bottle. Well, I did that at my brother's house. As I said in that video, he was eyeing it, and so I took it over to his house for Easter weekend, and we had a sip of it. I was somewhat impressed by the nose. I was not really very impressed by the flavor, and he really wasn't either. Neither one of us had more than a small glass. And I've really got to say that the more of this that I drink, the better I like it. I'll talk a little bit about my first impressions as I come in and I nose this again and I taste it again. I was initially enamored with the color. It's a very dark amber. It's one of the darkest colored bourbons that I've seen, and that obviously is from the port wine casks. On the nose, it's very fruity, very grapey. You can definitely notice the wine in here. But it's not just grapes. It's dried grapes, raisins, currants, dried cherries, apricots, very dark fruits and dried fruits. It smells very sweet. It's really, really very pleasant. It reminds me a lot of some of the old wines that I have. I love an old wine that most people might consider past its prime. It's turned that sort of reddish brown color. It's got a lot of deep dried fruit flavors like those that I just described. I love those kinds of wines. Old Zinfandels are a particular love of mine. A little bit of dark chocolate, some tobacco and leather. It's a very complex bourbon on the nose. And it was right from when I opened the bottle. I really enjoyed the nose of this bourbon, and I like it even more now. There's also some tartness, some apricot that I get in here. Okay, let's give it a taste. It's a sweet bourbon. There's a caramel flavor. I don't really get a whole lot of vanilla on this. That's perhaps covered up or taken out by the port wine. It has those dried fruit flavors. It's got that tangy tartness of the dried apricot. It's got an oily, soft mouth feel to it. It really coats the tongue. It coats the roof of my mouth. It's got a nice long finish to it. But what I didn't enjoy, and the first time I tasted it, is that it's got this sort of sour taste to it. And I'm not talking here sour mash. I'm talking something more like sour milk. It's very subtle, very much in the background, and it's kind of gone out of it. I don't notice it as much after trying it for this second time. But it's still there. And it's this sort of sharpness, this kind of thing where it's like, that flavor. It's not pleasurable, and it's more noticeable on the finish than anywhere else. It's the kind of thing that actually, it sort of ruins what I think is otherwise a really nice bourbon. So would I put this and keep this on the shelf as that special find that nobody's ever heard of? Well, I might, but I might also be looking to replace it. Would I buy it again? I'm thinking probably not. We'll see how the rest of the bottle goes. Maybe it gets better as it's sitting around, it's opening up, it's breathing a little bit. Perhaps it'll get a little better. It's certainly better tonight than it was on Saturday night when we first sampled it. But it's still not quite there. It's not something that I'm really, really enjoying a lot of. There's a sort of dryness to it, which is kind of nice, that sort of takes that unpleasantness out. It's very leathery, and again, tobacco is what I'm getting now as I've sipped on this a little bit. I could get that on the nose, but I wasn't getting that in the mouth, over the tongue, on the palate. But I'm sort of picking it up now as I've drank a little more of this. Gotta say that it is getting a little better. Maybe it's something that by the time I've emptied the bottle, I'll actually be enjoying and that perhaps I would try again. Maybe not. If you like my videos, hit the like button. If you want to see more of this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Have you tried the Woodinville Port Cask Finished? Have you tried the other Woodinville products? Are they any good? What do you think? Thanks for watching, and y'all come back now, you hear?